for tuning in to another episode of Rational Discourse Weekly. This is episode 28, filmed on Monday, July 15th, 2013. I'm William Garrison.
And I'm Aune.
And we talk about morality this week.
Yeah, sort of hash it out in a more philosophical way, but just sort of try and flesh it out and then figure out how it might be relevant to atheistic and religious discussions.
We tie it all back.
We tie it all together.
Yep.
The bunny goes through the hole. What is it? I don't remember.
Yeah, I just tied my shoes. I don't know.
Anyway, stay tuned. So, we should probably talk about one thing this week. I don't know how well received our freeform style will have been by this point, but yeah, I thought we should play with some basic sort of philosophical concepts that underlie a lot of our topics, but we don't necessarily spend the time to hash out or play with and pull at the strings and see how they work.
Well, and for those that don't know, Michael went to school for philosophy. He has a degree, so...
We'll do. And the topic we want to cover today, which would be morality and ethics, is sort of what I specialized in. You don't really specialize in undergraduate, I grant that completely. But out of the 70-something credit hours in philosophy, 30 to 40 were probably related to ethics in some way, or morality.
So it's at least an unofficial focus, if nothing else.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we have our novice philosopher here, our atheist in training, our valiant noob to the cause. So, I will start. William, what for you is morality? Just the concept in general, not the specific morality, but when someone says morality, how would you define that term? Just roughly.
I think, without knowing a lot about the topic, but just from what I've heard or had conversations about, is I feel like it's a man-made construct, but it's come about because we have empathy, because we're complex individuals. We're not. When you look at a dog or a rat, you're not like, are they living moral lives? And I don't think that they make decisions based on morality.
It's like they're outside whatever the moral sphere is. Yeah. They are not in it. We are inside of it.
They're in a black and white, survival, death, situation.
Yeah.
Every decision that they seem to make directly involves them either being warm, fed, alive, in danger.
So what's missing in that? For you, so you're making choices, right?
Yeah.
Now, we all make choices. Yes, our lives are easy in comparison. But in theory, it could be a group of us out in the desert and we're still fighting for survival. And it is life or death. And so what is the thing to you that's missing that makes those decisions moral or immoral versus just survival or not survival?
You mean what's different?
What are the missing concepts? What is the thing that's added to your decision-making process that gets you from just making a decision based on either instinct or pure rationality and getting you to that moral phase?
Free will or logic, or I'm not exactly sure.
I'm trying to nudge you. It's good or it's right or wrong. It's the idea that you're doing something that is right.
Yeah, and that kind of comes from empathy. I think it's because we. I've mentioned in the past, at least, I've read some interesting things about mirror neurons. It's the reason why you itch if you see a spider, or babies cry if they see another baby cry. We have a natural attachment to other humans that other animals don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
And by humans, I mean any human you see. You see someone get hit by a car, you don't even know them, and you feel their pain in a way.
Yeah.
In a sense, especially if you see it face to face.
Yeah. It need not be someone you know or someone you're close to. It could be.
And I think, at least at the basic level, our concepts of good and evil come from that. Yeah. It's good is anything I would want to happen to me.
Yeah.
Or it makes me feel good, whether I'm doing it for someone else or something. And then evil is something I would hate to happen to me, or something that makes me feel wrong while I'm doing it.
Yeah. You touch on an interesting thing there because you're defining them from the subjective viewpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily that's how you actually feel about it, but I mean, your examples were very much what is good for me and what is bad for me.
Right.
And then basically you extrapolate goodness and badness, or evil and goodness, to both. Just to sort of define the term, I'm going to steal Wikipedia's because I like it. It's pretty simple. Morality is the differentiation of intentions, decisions, and actions between those that are good or right and those that are wrong, or bad or wrong. So it's just the very basic principle. It's the very simple act of making the differentiation through your actions and choices. And then typically ethics are the actual philosophical systems of morality. So the idea is that you're choosing between right and wrong, and there are different ethical systems that tell you how do you do that. So you have consequentialism, which says that you should, generally speaking, try and maximize the greatest amount of good.
Okay.
So that should be your guiding principle to how to choose between right and wrong. So you make the wrong decision, the bad decision, if you don't maximize goodness through your actions.
Okay.
Things like that. You get something like deontology, which is duty-bound theory. So the idea that you have a duty or an obligation, and you do right if you fulfill that obligation. So I made a promise to you I was going to pick you up from the airport. It is my duty to pick you up from the airport, and I do wrongly if I do not pick you up.
Some people label that as karma.
Well, yeah. And there are many different systems that are out there. Did I get it?
I don't know.
No, we both failed. That must have been exciting.
You might not even see it on camera, so it just looks like...
There isn't that. We are not insane, I swear. But in any case, so morality, right away, and it's curious because we all live with morality. So anyway, I find it interesting that assuming you're not a sociopath or a psychopath, you live a moral life, or you at least generally aspire to. You at least understand morality is a thing to which we all at least aspire or are inconvenienced by, however it affects you. But it's there, and yet when you actually try and pin it down, it's very difficult to sort of get to what morality actually is. And so that fundamental dichotomy of basically rightness and wrongness, or goodness and badness, sort of drives the whole moral enterprise. So everything else is sort of hashed out in terms of that. Now, those terms themselves, though, are not well defined. What is goodness? What is badness? And that's interesting because, sort of defining morality is easy, but defining what defines morality, a particular moral system, is totally up for grabs, basically. So you sort of touched on that your feeling is sort of empathy gives us a grounding towards other humans, other persons, that gives you a sense of, and you sort of defined it, again, based on what would be good for me, what would be a positive benefit, what would I like to happen, versus what would be negative. So.
Yeah, and what I want to say about that is you expound off of your personal feeling, because you can't, most people honestly can't feel for others, but it's we're all human, so we have some of the same core, with the want to be happy, the want to succeed, the want to laugh, smile, play, have fun, whatever.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like because it's based on a feeling, the middle line between good and evil is kind of blurred, but that there are certain things at both polar ends that most people can agree on.
Yeah.
It's just once you get closer to that line, when we talk about certain religions, so to bring this back to the religious topics, the treatment of women, animals, children, that's where that line in the middle sort of swings or gets blurred, is because one religion might say one thing's okay and another religion might completely disagree, but I think both would say, well, it's not at one of the polar ends. It's most, pretty much everyone on the planet would say that murdering innocent people for no reason
is wrong. Yeah.
Or that, I don't know, kissing a loved one is good. There are those ends that most people wouldn't disagree with.
Taking care of your children is a positive thing you should do in the world. Well, it's interesting. So, once you establish sort of what morality is, then you have to build out, well, how do you determine? Generally, if you want to act morally, you need to know what's your goal.
Yeah.
What are your standards to which you will be held? And it's very interesting because, and I think this is where a huge catching point is, there's sort of two schools of thought. I don't know, schools of thought. There's just sort of two ideas. Like, there's subjective morality, which is basically going to say that morality is felt at the individual level, or it's going to say something along the lines of morality, there is no objective standard. So we can talk about good and wrong, like good and bad all day long. But if there's no objective good and bad standard that we're sort of arguing towards, and it's just my opinion about what's good and bad versus yours, although we may share many opinions, which allows us to functionally work with one another, it means that sort of the fear is, and this is an objection that's brought up a lot by religion towards non-theistic versions of morality, that there ultimately is no wrong answer. So the psychopath who thinks that it's the best thing in the world to just murder indiscriminately, you can't ultimately say from outside of the human endeavor, yeah, that guy's wrong. He should not be doing that. You can say that according to me and my group of people who feel this way, what you're doing is wrong, but that's only sort of within our little school of thought. Your school of thought obviously differs, and since there's no standard to which we can appeal to give us a right or wrong answer, everything goes. And it's a comedy, it's the relativistic worry, and it's pretty powerful. I mean, people use that to great effect. And there have been many attempts to ground a morality without using God, because God is the ultimate cop-out. I mean, should say cop-out, that's unnecessarily condescending. God is an easy answer, because God either, one, enforces goodness and badness, which are out there, which is a little weird because that implies that they're separate from him, so people have some problems with that, or God is the definer of goodness and badness. So you can at least say that when we have a dispute about what's right or wrong, we can turn to God and God will tell us who's right.
Right.
Done.
You could point to a holy book or something.
So that objective standard, that objective morality is, many people feel, a powerful argument in favor of that theory. Not that it's the only one that can do it, but it's part of it and it works.
It seems like the people that rely on that type of morality, they feel like the social construct that society will collapse because we won't have a guiding force.
Well, it's like the laws were given, and if you took away the lawgiver, then haven't you taken away what was given? And so then everything goes.
But this may be a dumb question, but wouldn't society then already fall because we just have so many religions and belief systems in place already?
I mean, it depends. So there you could get the idea that maybe these are different revelations or interpretations of God's law, but ultimately God is behind them all. That maybe there is really one.
Right.
Or, I mean, you could go, there are many gods. We focus on one a lot, but there's really nothing that says that if there's one God, there can't be more, or shouldn't be more.
Right. I mean, I would go further to say, well, what about the countries that are run as secular countries? But I'm guessing the backpedal would be, well, those laws that were made in those countries were made by religious people. So they used So
well, I mean, to be fair, like you and I live in a Christian ethical system. Yeah. Not that we believe in God or believe in Jesus or follow the particular Christian precepts or doctrines. But
the United States is technically a secular country.
We're very much influenced by what was Christian morality for hundreds of years. So it's very difficult to say, what does an atheistic morality look like? Because we're not there. We're not a post-religious society. You and I are post-religious,
right?
But our society is not. So it's hard to say. I think my values come from both sort of the innate empathetic response towards fellow persons, or even the things that we identify as close enough to humans, it's why people like cats and dogs and things that we somehow, I think we see ourselves in them or them in us a little bit. We recognize that they feel pleasure and they seem to be happy or sad, and we respond to that. We give them a measure of moral consideration.
Right. I feel like some of what morality, it kind of reminds me of the analog that people say for like mother's instinct, the instinct to care and nurture.
Yeah.
In some senses, it's like it's not just a mother.
Just look at mammals. Almost all baby mammals have round faces with big eyes and big exaggerated features. Why do you think we all think kittens and puppies are the cutest thing in the world? Because they remind us of babies. Right. Babies have the same thing. It's like a mammalian trait. Yeah. And so way back when, at some point, that sort of pattern triggered a caring response, in a sense. And at least that's what I read. That there seems to be a pattern in mammalian species that make it so that parents and other mammals bond to that pattern of like roundness and big eyes. So okay, so no wonder we like kittens. Like there's obviously something natural that leads us towards that empathetic response. But then there's no doubt that there are cultural norms that are completely different. You know, in Asia they eat dogs in some countries. To them they don't recognize the animal conceptually, culturally, with the same cultural norms that we do. So to them it's not immoral.
And for us, just to point on the dog thing, like I don't condone eating dogs, but it's weird to think because if we didn't domesticate dogs, if they weren't in most homes, they're really only one step away from any other animal you'd be okay eating. A chicken, a
is really all it
pig.
is.
Yeah. You can't. I don't want to eat my own dog, so I can't imagine eating someone else's dog.
Yeah. Which is why there's no doubt that there's cultural components to building a moral system. Like ethics is definitely largely provided.
Yeah.
Which does, in a sense, support relativism to a degree. But then you point out that there are certain things which just pretty much no one will point out and say that that's acceptable, like murder, rape, genocide, ethnic cleansing, theft. I mean, you can even back down where it's not necessarily a violent crime. Most people will say, no, theft is never good. Like, why are you stealing? Stop being an asshole.
Yeah, and what's weird about the theft thing is like the whole Robin Hood theory, stealing from the rich, because they didn't deserve it. Like even in literature where that was okay, or you started to side with the quote unquote criminal, it was because the person who you were stealing from was bad.
Yeah.
So that it's kind of interesting to know how ethics even in literature like that plays out.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So Sam Harris in The Moral Landscape, you know, you get a lot of different takes on it. Some philosophers dismiss it outright because he's trying to do something which David Hume back in the day, he's a Scottish philosopher. It's kind of awesome.
I've heard the name.
Yeah. It's famously said is you cannot derive an ought from an is. You cannot take the way that the world is and tell us how we should or it should be. Pretty powerful. He just says there's no logical way you get there. Okay, most people sort of accept that on its face. So when Sam Harris was effectively trying to do that, he was trying to say the way that people are, the way that humanity is, implies a way that we should be, implies a way we should act. He was effectively deriving an ought from an is. So some people would, give the benefit of the doubt and discuss the work on its merits and whatever, because he's making a philosophical argument in that work. But he says a couple interesting things, I think, in it. One, I think his project is interesting. Whether or not he succeeds in developing the idea that you can put forward an objective standard to which different moral systems will acknowledge they have a basis. So, like, his thing is well-being.
Okay.
The idea that morality is fundamentally about living well.
Yeah.
Now, that's sort of an ambiguous term, and he equates it to health. Like, health is sort of a vague term. What does health mean? Well, it sort of varies sometimes by person, varies by time frame. Time period will add different criteria to what it is to be healthy versus not. But we all sort of get what it means. Like, we all want to be healthy.
Right. The word has meaning to everyone.
It has meaning even if it's not strictly defined meaning. He says well-being can effectively do the same thing. And all ethical systems so far seem to strive for well-being. Human well-being or person, the well-being of persons. Because he doesn't necessarily limit it to just Homo sapiens. I think that's interesting. And I think there he makes at least a courageous effort. I'm still not sure how I feel about the actual philosophical foundation for it, but it's interesting. And the other thing he says, which I think is really... People will object, and part of me wants to object, and part of me thinks he's spot on. He goes, some people don't have a say in it. Some people don't get to tell you what's moral and not, because some people are just wrong about things. We don't invite laypersons into a scientific field to pass judgment on things. Some people are simply not qualified to speak to a subject. So like a psychopath doesn't get to enter into the conversation of what's right and wrong.
Because by definition they don't understand the conversation.
He doesn't understand what it is like for human well-being. He's missing a huge part of what it is to be human for 98%
in this case,
of species.
They lack the part of the brain or whatever. forget what
the empathetic response, basically. Well, if you're going like psychopath, it's like, not only do you not care, you don't feel the empathetic response, you sort of also have a hard time adhering to rule-based systems. Whereas a sociopath, generally speaking, knows the rules and will adhere to them, but simply does them because they're the rules, or for self-interest as opposed to do the right thing. But in any case, I'll probably get close to wrapping this up, but my only point sort of this whole conversation is it's a very rich topic. It's often thrown into the religious debate because of the importance of morality to people.
Well, in the argument, I don't know if you specifically worded it this way, but an argument that we as atheists see often is, without religion, the world would crumble. We would all be rapists and pedophiliacs and
Pedophiles.
There you go. So I'm trying to make a word.
Pedophiliacs. That's a new one.
And so, anytime you have the conversation about something that quote unquote goes against the Bible, talking about gay marriage, because that's been really relevant in the past 10 years, more or less.
I think it was Hitchens who said, some people throw that at him and they go, well, people can just do whatever they want. And he goes, yeah, I do kill as many people as I want.
Or yeah,
it's zero.
I've killed as many people as I would like to.
Yeah. And it's zero. The idea that, okay, let's say that we abandon that sort of religious black and white standard of morality. Does that actually mean that people are going to go off the deep end? I mean, that's an empirical question. We could test it in a sense. Like, I don't know how exactly you could do it, but you could measure the effects. You could say, here was how the world was before, and then here we scientifically proved there was no God, and then everything went to hell. Right? I could prove that. So that's at least an empirical question. We're at least approaching a realm where we could definitively say, either yes, you're right about this, or wrong.
Well, I think, and if religion continues to slow or to lose its embrace on society, especially,
atrophy, basically, just to wither away,
then historians will literally do that test for us. They'll look back to the 2000s and prior and be like, here's what society looked like when religion had a hold on ethics and morality, when religion ruled that part of philosophy, and here it is now. Compare.
Yeah. What's interesting is we already do that, and there's no doubt that 500 years from now, 100 years from now, 50 years from now, people will do that to us. We always are critiquing ourselves in our past. We look back at racism and slavery and just the oppression of women, and we're like, how? Like, how is that even remotely possible? And yet,
how did anyone think that was moral or ethical?
Huge swaths of the country did. Either actively supported it or neutral, or at maybe even worst, were like just apathetic and like, well, I don't really like slavery, but I'm not gonna get off my couch.
I don't have slaves.
I'm dying of TB. I don't think I'm gonna do that. So anyway, morality is just a subject I think that it bears a lot of fruit to examine it a little bit more fully. It doesn't take a whole lot to get familiar with the concepts, so seriously, you can Wikipedia this stuff for like an hour and at least get an interesting framework for some of the ways people have thought about morality, common systems of morality, common objections to and for certain advantages of an ethical system versus another. But given how often this comes up in the debates to which we are usually a party, as far as religious debates and stuff, I think it's very important to be familiar with it, to hash it out, and really sort of get in there and figure out what it is you're talking about. Because, well, morality is really damn important.
It affects us all.
Yeah.
So, think about it.
Do that thing. The thinking. Please.
Alright.
Cool. Until next week, I suppose, I don't know. Do good things. Be moral. Be moral.